Good morning, and I think let me just pick up the baton from you after yesterday's special broadcast on the State of the Nation address. One of the big stories making headlines, of course, is the deployment of the SANDF to deal not only with zama-zamas, but with hotspot crime-ridden communities. This is an issue that is germane to what we're hearing at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, because we talk about this really being within the ambit and the purview of law enforcement. These issues should be dealt with if we had a fully muscularized, fully functional law enforcement complex. We would not be sitting with the issue of zama-zamas as we are today. And that's my first question, really, to Eldred de Klerk, our security analyst. Eldred, we've spoken about this before. The president's now made that particular announcement. It all goes back to the corrosion of police and our law enforcement complex being able to do the jobs that they are hired to do. Good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Iman, and thank you to Arabelle. It's the way he says Eldred de Klerk. I couldn't say that. I couldn't roll my R's quite the way Arabelle does. Iman, when it comes to the deployment of the South African Defence Force, we've seen this before. Unfortunately, we may not have always learned the lessons from their deployment. Napoleon Bonaparte is said to have said that if you're going to take Vienna, take it. And this is more than just stability on the Cape Flats or Gauteng and the suburbs and townships within those two provinces. It's about the governance and control, compliance and regulation of those settlements and activities that happen within that settlement. If the South African Defence Force is deployed for the South African government and for the body politics to wrestle back control of these areas and to begin to govern it so that it's not being governed by criminal syndicates, and there's a plan to do exactly that, and there's a particular strategy based on clear intelligence and understanding of what's happening in those areas, with the right cooperation and support from the political figures and public representatives in those areas, then that deployment will increasingly bring hope to people. Because why are we at Madlanga and why are people sitting watching Madlanga? Iman, two words come to mind for me. One, we remain hopeful. After the IPID testimony and even before that, and both that's what's happening at the ad hoc committee, we hear alarm bells about just how our public officials within those departments are working almost resigned to the risk and threats that comes from them doing their work on a daily basis. So those two words come to me. Hope. If we want to instill hope, we need to do it properly, and we need to do it with a determined effort and the necessary resourcing. And then we also need to mitigate the risk and threats that our public officials are working under, Iman.
It resonates with the way that our nannies from Tshwane shared with us at the opening of the program this morning, what they took away from the Madlanga Commission testimonies this week. In other words, what resonated the most for them, and it was on Nomsa Masuku's testimony. She, of course, is an investigator with the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. Also the testimony of Thuso Kefe-Lakai, who is the Director of Investigations and a provincial coordinator at the IPID. Both of their testimonies are really just talking to the fact that they're working under stress, and she herself feeling the personal deadly threats of being someone who's on the front line of investigating corruption and corrupt officials working inside the SAPS. How important was that view? And we've known that it's had deadly results. I mean, we've seen the slaying of Marius van der Merwe last year, who was before that moment known as Witness D.
It's important for two reasons, Iman. One, we often are frustrated by our public institutions and the lack of progress and the seemingly inaction on their part. This is a window into their world and the daily challenges that these public officials, and in this case, the investigators of IPIDs and others, work under. The lack of cooperation, they don't receive cooperation, people don't honor agreements and memorandums of understanding. They have operational challenges, they're under-resourced and under-capacitated. We now see that, and hopefully we can get a greater appreciation for their lives and the challenges under which they work. Secondly, not just do we want to alleviate our frustration with them, but hopefully it makes us advocates for the fact that there needs to be political will and decisive action to course correct. We can use our voices and our platforms, and in this case, Newzroom Afrika and other media houses have been central to not only providing, as you always say, not just, people have voices, we just need to amplify those voices. But we can also amplify the challenges, and we can also amplify interventions that can possibly course correct. So the second part of this is that now we have a populace that understands, or beginning to understand, appreciate the challenges, and in their own way can begin to fight, advocate, and become activists for fundamental change. And if we can use the SONA and the upcoming budget speech and the upcoming elections towards beginning to course correct and getting a South African population behind these efforts, we can again instill hope, and we can fulfill the promise of the Constitution, Iman.
Here's the thing is, while we talk about these things, and we have the luxury of course, benefiting from your analysis from an institutional perspective, there are investigators who are on the front line. I mean, my observation in her testimony was that she really just exposed, she shared with the commission about being reticent for Marius van der Merwe, witness D, to testify in the way that he did, worried about his life. Of course, it turned out the way that she did. And during the course of her investigation as well, talked about people who've died during the course of those investigations. There was a pattern which is very concerning around witness protection. She herself, she and her children were once shot at during the Mbense investigation. Her family has been affected by other incidents of violence. You heard a testimony as well from Tuso Kevalai, who also said that there was a report, the 2023 report from IPID into suspended EMPD Acting Chief Julius Mkhwanazi, recommending disciplinary action. In other words, there were things that could have been done. There were investigations that had yielded some recommendations and results. Those didn't have, they didn't result in the actions that they were hoping would be taken. There's this clash between people who are working and wanting things to be done and others who have effectively captured the state.
Absolutely, man. And remember, the NPA was hesitant, or said that the case surrounding the murder, essentially, of the businessman that the 12 suspects are implicated in, was not winnable because it was based on the testimony of a single witness. This investigator was concerned for the life of the single witness. That single witness provided them with the opportunity to go and question other individuals. Yes, it took 3 years. However, they did get warning statements from those individuals. Her fears, unfortunately, were realized when Witness D was killed. And as you say, she is an example of other investigators across government and government departments that are working under severe stress and duress, where their lives and lives of their families are threatened, and action have actually been taken against her, against them, and against her, and against others. So when we look at that, we have to ask questions around, why are they not being listened to? Why are their directions, their concerns, their analysis, their understanding seemingly not being taken serious by their superiors or the leadership of those institutions? Because if she had reservations to say Witness D should not be testifying and going into an open forum, why did Witness D was allowed that to happen? She's the lead investigator. Now it jeopardizes her investigation, and it jeopardizes justice for the Benzi family. And that's a critical concern going forward, that other witnesses could be reticent, families could lose hope, and they don't see justice being done. We got to take the misgivings and the direction of our investigators. They got to be supported in their efforts, and we got to take them seriously, Iman.
And that's where really, just very quickly in closing, Eldred, the potential gift and the boon that the Madlanga Task Force, I'm calling it that, is going to provide in, now that we've exposed the gaps in oversight and in managing and enforcing police corruption, that's something finally, this is the opportunity to be able to do that so that ordinary investigators, people who want to get on with their jobs, are able to do it in the interest of the pursuit of justice of South Africans.
Iman, your analysis is spot on. The task force, task team, call it what you like, is there to bolster and complement. Yes, they will lead on certain investigations that are right now front and center and has to be dealt with. They will follow and pursue particular lines of inquiry coming directly from Madlanga, where there's prima facie evidence that people might be guilty or have a case to answer. However, all the efforts should be coordinated and dovetail and complement ongoing investigations by other investigators in other departments so that there's a concerted and joined up effort to deal with the malaise that we're in. Because remember, task force are short-lived. While they work, they at the same time needs to strengthen, institutionalize good practice, and ethical behavior, and ensure that these institutions tasked with this on a daily basis beyond the task force can continue to do their work. So that joint up effort is what's being called for, and we're hopeful that this will be led in a way that's understanding of that and leaves a lasting legacy, man.
Eldred de Klerk, thank you as always for your analysis. We really do appreciate it. It's a touch after 7:30. Arabile, back to you.
Iman, thank you so much for that, as well as Eldred de Klerk, as I'd like to formally say, of course, as I keep that name like that. Eldred, thank you so much for joining us for that analysis as well.